Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to another webinar from Business Analysis community. Today we have with us Ivan Iakovlev. Welcome Ivan. And
Welcome.
Ivan, Ivan is a senior business analyst located in Armenia. Welcome Ivan. So how is the weather in Armenia?
Well, it's quite good weather. It's sunny and warm. Yeah, there's still some snow here, but it's melting, and yeah, it's almost like winter here. Oh, sorry, it's warm. Yeah.
Okay, I miss the snow. I don't see snow for a long time right now. Here in my location, I'm in Portugal. It's 15 degrees, so very far from snowing.
I see.
So
I see.
Ivan will present us Mastering API Documentation, a quick guide to understanding and creating effective documentation. A very interesting theme to all of us. Some announcements from my part. As usual, a recording will be provided after the presentation. At the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So please send your questions to our YouTube chat, or if you prefer, to our internet page from Business Analysis community. And that's it. Ivan, the stage is yours. Please.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're here to hear you.
Yeah, let me share my presentation. Yeah, just bear with me a minute. Yeah, thank you. Let me start with, today's topic is API documentation. Yeah, so I will try to share my experience and share my view of this topic, this documentation. I think it's quite important for BAs nowadays because there are some demand for creating API documentation, as you can see in our positions open. So let me start with just a brief introduction of myself. So my name is Ivan. I'm senior business analyst working in EPAM, and I have 5 years experience in business and system analysis. And well, I have some experience working with API itself. So today I would like to share with you some of my experience. I hope it would useful for you. So first of all, I would like to start with small story. Yeah, I would like to ask you about your experience with API itself. So just to understand what experience do you have and how deep I should dive into this API. So could you please just open the mentee.com and use this code here that presented here, or could you please just photo this QR code and just leave your vote here in these sections here. I just want to understand what our audience we have today, and yeah, I will leave you just a couple of minutes to that. Yeah. Now we have only one vote, but yeah, let's wait for 30 seconds maybe. Okay, I see. So for now, at least some of us have some experience in API documentation. Okay, in API itself. Okay, I see. Okay. So more than 30 people have some experience with API. Okay, I see. I think we could stop this voting. Yeah, thank you for your votes. Thank you, colleagues. And let's go back to my presentation. Sorry, let me just share it again. Sorry, bear with me. Just a second. Yeah, in that way, as you can see, most of us have some experience in API. So in that case, I will not miss a lot of time to explain what API is. I think most of us understand that it's just just application program interface, and well, basically it's used to, let me put this, to communicate between different systems, so software application. Yeah, so you could get some information from this API, from this endpoint, or just put some information to there. So, and actually there are, from my perspective, three major types of API. It's like private API, public API, and partner APIs. From documentation point, there could be slight difference between them. So, for example, if you using public APIs, you should understand that a lot of people could use your API, and you should describe it more in more general way. Let me put it this way. So it should be possible to understand what your API do for more people, yeah, than if you use private API or partner APIs. So let's just move on, and yeah, a small description what exact types of API exist. There are several of them, and well, again, it depends on your APIs, on what aim do your APIs have. But anyway, there could be reference documentation, tutorials, examples, just examples, and release notes. And well, it's usually there is no big difference again between them. So, but for example, for tutorials, you will provide exact steps that you want to, what user should have to proper use your APIs. Yeah, so for reference documentations, it could be just documentation for internal use, for example, for your developers, from your company, but from another team. Yeah, so it could be it could be presented in this way. And yeah, let's move on. And I would to share my view of what should be included in API documentation. So actually, there are a lot of different ways to create it, but from my perspective, in my experience, there is a list of the most important sections, yeah, parts of API documentation that you should include in your documentation. So first of all, introduction or overview. I think it's quite important, especially if you have a public API, to explain the end users what your API do, how it should be used. Yeah, for example, well, yeah. So if it's, I don't know, Facebook API, yeah. So it should provide some introduction to that. I will dive deep into these sections, each of these sections further. But anyway, we have introductions, tutorials, authorizations, quite important part two, endpoints, requests and responses, and other things that we could include in our documentation. So let me just dive into introduction. As I could say, here you could include some instruction for the most common use cases for your API. So, for example, you can do that, or you can do that. So you can, I don't know, have some list of users for Facebook page or something. Yeah, for example. And here, I think it's better. You should use like a conversational tone, not so too formal. You should just explain it how you will explain it to, not to technical person. Yeah, for everyone should understand it. Well, it's not, and usually this introduction is used for public APIs or maybe for partner APIs. So if you want to use it not internally, not in your team, but some external users will use it. So next one, tutorials. Well, it's a quick guide for the steps in what should be done in to use your APIs. Yeah, so it's like, for example, if you have to, in my experience here, we could provide some required steps to use your API. For example, you should, create a login, or maybe you should have some authorization token from outside the API. Maybe you will provide it with your manager or something in email. So you should provide some exact steps, what should be done here to use your API. Yeah, and again, it's better to use here like real use cases, real life use cases here, how it could be used. And the next part, authentication. I think it's one of the most important part of API documentation, because well, it's a security part. Yeah, we're talking about security, so it's especially again if you're talking about public APIs, but in private APIs too, it's important how we provide authentication for our users. What users can do with our API, what they can do, and you should provide a very full description how authentication on your API works. What type of API do you usually use in API? You should provide the exact process here. You can see, for example, here is a sequence diagram that describe the process of generating tokens, keys, and other things that needed to authorize into your API. So I think you should definitely put some examples here. So, and maybe again, it could be mixed with the tutorial. So you can provide exact steps. For example, as I said, you take some token for your organization, then you receive some token for exact user and so on. So, and yeah, I think it's a good point to provide here some common issues that you can have. For example, your token is expired. I don't know, there is no such users in the system, and you should go there, support your manager, or so on. So you should provide as much information as you can here, because again, authorization is a very important topic. Next one, endpoints. Well, without endpoints, yeah, I think your API is not don't make any sense here to provide API without endpoints. So you have again to describe your endpoints. What HTTP methods using here for these exact methods? What parameters should be provided to use it? Yeah. So, and yeah, what parameters are optional and what are mandatory? So it's quite important, because without it, yeah, you just can't you just can't use APIs in the proper way. Yeah, because if you don't understand what you want to ask your API or what you want to put to this API, so you just can't understand how it uses it all. Next one, request and response. It's like another topic. So here it's a better way to provide some examples of requests that should be put in this API and responses that will be get back to you. So because of course you can have just description of it. Like you can create a table when you can describe each parameter, the mandatory fields and so on. But I think it's just good way to provide exact request and response, because when developers will work with you and developers and testers will work with your API, they can just take this request and response and understand if this request works correctly, or where if there are some mistakes, on what side there are mistakes is. On their side is the API, let me say, caller, or either errors or issues on API itself. Yeah, so, and for this, you should definitely provide some request and response. And here, you should be very careful to provide, examples up to date, because it's quite a common issue when developers update your API, but requests and responses became outdated. And you should carefully, as BA, you should be sure that your requests and responses are up to date, because it will create a lot of questions from external team if it's not. So yeah, let's proceed further. And yeah, another point is rate limits, rate limiting on rate limits. So on especially on public API, there are some limits for number of requests per some time. Yeah, for example, for minutes, for hours, a days. And you should properly describe it in your API documentation, because if you have a high load API and there are a lot of requests coming in one at the moment, so you should just provide exact description of limits for each users. I don't know, for example, if you have several several options. For example, for this user, you have 10 requests per minute. For this, 1,000 requests per minute. All the users should have a clear picture how much requests and response they have for a certain period of time. And yeah, you should provide what will happen if this limit will be exceeded. Yeah, so what should be done, how they could manage this. Yeah, so everyone should understand their limits. Yeah. And the next one, another important part. Unfortunately, again, in my experience, I have had some mistakes in here. So you don't provide proper description of the status and error codes that you have. Well, it's a very important topic. It's very important part of this API description, because again, with your API will be working developers and end users, and they should understand what's going on with API. Do they have proper requests? Do they have some issues with the response or the request? And as you know, API usually have some validation of the requests and some exact some exact type of responses. And for each of them, you should provide codes and errors descriptions. For example, if you have like HTTP status to 100, so it's okay, but yeah, you should provide, it's better to provide some description too. So everything is okay, and this part of API proceed work with so successfully. Yeah, so your request was proceed successfully. So I think yeah, it should be provided even in successful scenario. Yeah, and the same is for error codes. And I think for error codes, it's even more important because everyone should understand where the error is. Yeah, so if it's your request, is it some third-party system pull the response? If there is nothing, there is some business problem in business logic. For example, you put in some, I don't know, incorrect values in some field, but it's not about the data itself. It's a business logic that lays under this data. Yeah, for example, you put, I don't know, some data, you just trying to create something in the future, or on the other way, some in the back. Yeah, so some of the history. So you can't do that with this API, and every user should understand what's going on. And for that, we should provide description of status and error codes. And yeah, the other thing that yeah, should be provided, it's versioning and changelog. Again, in my experience, I have issues with that when our team just made some quite important changes in our API. It actually made our API not acceptable for the users in some, with some options. And but we didn't update the version, and we didn't let our users know about it. And there were a lot of complaining from the users, and it's quite understandable because they wasn't aware about it, about our changes. So you should, as a PA, the part is a person who responsible for work with the customers and sometimes with the end users. You should definitely, you should definitely be sure that your version and is describing your API. So basically, this is it with the content of API documentation. And the next thing that I want to describe is some tools that could help you with creating API documentation. And actually, I want to share you with two tools that I personally used, but it's not, of course, it's not a full list. There are a lot of different documentation. But I think most commonly used it's Swagger and the Postman. Swagger, it's quite well. Some people say that it's just mostly common use tool to create documentation. It can be used in. Yeah, let me just share the picture of this. So there are some. As always, yeah, there are some pros and cons for this Swagger and for this tool. And actually, there are a special language to create API documentation here. So you could just write it, and you will, as an outcome, you will have a special document with, and the most, I think, useful thing here is that you yourself, you can use it. You can try your API. You can test it in some way, and it's just a documentation, yeah. And well, yeah, so you can use Open API like language to create. You can import and export API description in some in JSON or in UML, so it's a quite useful thing. Yeah, and yeah, there is a macros in Confluence where you could just put this description and can use in your, KB page and for your internal use. Oh yeah, and another thing, another tool that I want to describe is a Postman. Usually Postman used to to create and to test API itself from from developer's point of view, but it's also allows you to create documentation based on your API. Well, basically that's it from my side. Yeah, it was quite a quick description of API documentation. Yeah, so if you have any question, yeah, feel free to ask him. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Very good presentation. Very good. And we have a lot of questions and just 3 minutes. Let's see if we can do this quickly. So,
okay.
First question from Herman Soroka. Will the presentation be shared after the webinar? Well, I think they can send you an email and you share.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, so Nugul, in your experience, which part of API documentation does the analytics usually cover, and what is done by dev team?
Well, of course, it depends on how your team works. But from in my experience, well, I work, I think, on the whole list of part of your documentation. So this is the whole list that I was working on. Maybe versioning and changelog was created by developers in most of time, but yeah, because they are who made these changes. But yeah, but other things, well, it was on my side. Yeah, but I should mention that I worked more as a system analyst, so it's more in technical details here. It was my responsibility on the project that I worked with. But yeah, yeah, that's all. In my yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question.
Next, we have Pavel that asks, what tools is recommended for documenting APIs?
Well, yeah, as I said, from my perspective, it's better to use Swagger because it's quite a flexible tool. But again, in my experience, I just used Confluence and created the same descriptions that we have here, but in the form of Confluence page on the tables and so on. Yeah. Yeah, so it's up to you, but yeah, Swagger it's quite a common tool to create documentation.
Okay, thank you. Tigran, he asks, are there any differences between describing REST and GraphQL APIs?
It's a good question. Well, if to be honest, I'm not sure that I'm a right person to say something about GraphQL because I don't have experience to work with it. But well, from my perspective, there could be some difference. But yeah, I can't say it right now. Yeah, so yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem. Hannah, Anna Boros, what do you recommend for a BA to getting started and try to learn APIs documentation?
Yeah, so actually there are a lot of great tutorials that I personally used when I trying to just started work with API documentation. You can go to Postman or Swagger itself, and there are a lot of tutorials, a lot of technical information, a lot of theoretical parts about APIs, API documentation. So you could just read it, and I think it could be useful, especially for novice people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Irina, do I understand correctly that not all the documentation can be written by BA? At least endpoints must be provided by the backend developer, or they should participate in the process of the documents?
Again, it depends on how
Documents creation.
you. Yeah. So. No worries. Yeah. So again, it depends on how your roles on your team. Yes, but in my experience, there could be different ways. So you can provide as people person who is responsible for requirements. You can provide the description of exact method, and then developer will create it in the code. But in the other way, you can the developer could say that in my perspective, we should use this method and this. So you just can't like not the reverse engineering, but from the code first approach. Yeah, so it depends on the situation. Yeah, but in my perspective, I followed the first one and the second two. So it depends on the situation.
Okay, thank you. Very persons are making questions. We passed already some minutes from the hour, but I think it's useful if you agree we go to the next questions.
Yeah.
From Olga, how do we know the rate limit? Who to address to learn about that?
Well, yeah. Usually, it's there could be again several approaches here. So it could be from the business perspective. You know, especially if you're using, if you're describing public API and your company just make money from your APIs. Yeah. So it could be limits from business perspective. For example, free use 10 requests per minute, and if you want to use it in your company and make money from that, so you should pay and you have this access for this time. But yeah, so it could be business perspective, and it could be some technical constraints. Your system just don't allow to put more requests per some time, because your system doesn't allow it, from load perspective, from technical point of view. So it could be from the business perspective and from technical constraints. So again, it depends on the situation. And yeah, for the business perspective, I think you should probably go to your managers, and to the technical, you should ask your developer team.
Okay. Thank you. From Florian, how to make sure the documentation is up to date with development and all examples are accurate and error-free?
Good questions. It's a quite, point of the pain, if I can say so, for the many teams. But you should provide transparent process in their team. I think it's more for the project processes. Yeah, so you just follow. You just have a clear picture. You should have a clear picture what's going on with your API. Maybe some you know meetings to describe what was done, or maybe to have some tasks to maybe you could create a definition of done, that all the documentation was updated before your task that connected with your API was done. So you should provide the proper documentation. So again, I think it's the question of transparency and communication within the team.
Yeah, I agree. The next one I lost. From Anastasia. What kind of documentation would be good to have in case we are not creating API but using some API from another team? It's the responsibility of a BA to create it?
Well, yeah. Actually, I have experience in creating ESBA such documentation, and in this case, it was usually some pages, maybe in Confluence or another tool that you using to to store and manage your requirements. But usually, it was almost the same picture, the same page and the same description, but from your perspective, what kind of request you should put to get some information from external API, what could be responses, and most important, what should be done with these responses in your system. For example, you get some data, and what should be done with the data? Do you want to store it? Do you want to just to put it in some third-party system? So maybe from my experience, it's better to provide business description of the process, what should be done with the data that you have. So it's a little bit another approach to describe API, but I think in the core of it will be still at least some description of the endpoints, errors, methods, and so on, authentification, because your developers should understand how to work with the external API.
Okay, we have 5 questions. Let's see, 8 minutes past our locked. From Laszlo, from security perspective, are the recommended tools safe enough to put customer-sensitive API information into?
Well, actually, if you use it like a top, it's just a representation tool. Actually, it's not. As far I'm not sure how it was done in from a technical point of view, but as far as I understand, you could just create your own instance of a Swagger here in your environment, and it will be saved. Yeah, so it will be not published externally. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not the best person to answer how it's done, but yeah, I know that in my project we have this opportunity, and yeah.
Okay, and some people ask what to read, what course to get to learn how to make API documentation.
Yes, great question. I'm not sure that I can share it off the top of my head, but I will try to share it after the meeting. Yeah, because
Okay,
I have
deal.
some examples. Yeah.
Atul, in API documentation area, is there any RACI matrix you are aware of agile team where BA works as a PO?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Maybe I remember. In API documentation area, is there any RACI matrix you were aware of? What agile team where BA works as a PO?
Well, if I understand it correctly, so I think this is the question if the BA responsible for creating API documentation in agile approach, in the agile framework. It's a great question, to be honest. But from my perspective, well, again, in my experience, it was the question of agreement within the team. Yeah, who is responsible for that? In some cases, it was BA who is responsible for creating it, even in agile. But in some cases, developer itself, they themselves created. So yeah.
Okay, one last question. We have 11 minutes after the hour, sorry. Who approves created API specifications? Is there a team of experts that usually review API docs?
Well, ideally, yes. There are some team that will update it and approve. Is it But in my experience, I was the person who is responsible for it because I'm who has created it, and I'm responsible for updating it and to improve the quality of it.
Okay, thank you so much, Ivan. Excellent presentation. Our viewers were very interested and many questions. I will talk to Ivan right after this meeting, this presentation, and he will choose the best question, and we will give that person a badge. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ivan, and see you next week. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. Bye bye.